Welcome to PetroNoia, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the energy debate. Hosted by Dan Romito, this show takes complex energy issues, strips away the agendas, and delivers clear fact-based insights. Whether you're an industry expert or simply looking for a balanced perspective, PetroNoia brings clarity to the conversation. Each episode, Dan breaks down key topics, from U.S. energy independence to global policy impacts, focusing on the facts rather than the rhetoric, helping listeners make sense of the energy landscape. This is PetroNoia, where we separate fact from fiction to fuel-informed discussions.
Welcome to PetroNoia. I'm your host, Dan Romito. I am in my man cave talking to my guy, Mike Umbro, who is obviously in his man cave supporting the Padres. Mike is a Southern California guy. He's been on the show before doing great stuff in the geothermal world, the oil and gas advocacy world, the political world, the investment banking world. Dude's all over the place. And so you had sent me a paper, which we were joking earlier had a variety of big words.
Right.
But it does seem like the tide is turning on how geothermal could actually be implemented, scaled, utilized, all the above. And once again, This is a serendipitous conversation because I was actually talking to one of my buddies at DOE, and he's like, is geothermal bullshit? I'm like, no, it's not. And I was literally like, it was like 20 minutes after I read your paper. I'm like, it's not. And here's why. So maybe just to take a step back, tell us about what you've been working on, give us the latest update, and we can dive straight into not necessarily a paper. We're going to do like a book report.
Sure.
It does raise a variety of topics of what's going on in the world.
Yeah. And I'm a good book reporter because I'm not an engineer. So I'm good at kind of giving the layperson perspective as more of a finance and environmental and development guy. But things are going well in Kern County. We just received 8 permits. So our demonstration for the technology, which is described in that paper by folks at the National Laboratory of the Rockies, our project partner on the demonstration project, our 8 wells for that demonstration are now fully permitted, ready to go. So that's great news on an update for us. We've held a public hearing for our aquifer exemption for ultimately underground injection of produced water back into the oil reservoir that it's produced from. So wherever you're operating, whether it's California or Texas, you need a UIC. Typically class 2 UIC covers oil field injection activities. And so we're now many years into that UIC process, and that's the next major regulatory hurdle for us to clear is getting that project approval for injection. So we're just marching along, trying to get all our full field entitlements, if you will.
No, man, that's awesome. So like just to take a quick step back, I think the gist of the paper, or at least the summary that I made ChatGPT help me on, focuses on like this notion of repurposing oil fields. Right. So I think one of the things that the market may not necessarily be aware of, or to the extent that we would like them to be aware of, is like these are not new, for lack of a better word, campuses you are building.
Right.
You are quote unquote sustainable, ESG focused, whatever weird adjective you want to utilize. Because you're taking existing, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, abandoned or orphaned oil and gas wells, and you're essentially retrofitting them with this technology. Did I read that right, or
close? Yeah, and I think it's a common. You see a lot of folks talking about this right now in the Eagle Ford, where you've got elevated temperatures and you've got a lot of well bores penetrating reservoirs that are in high temperatures. And can we repurpose existing wells, or can we integrate them into the project? So the way we look at it, we look at the wells as the trees and the reservoir as the forest. So ultimately, Kern County's oil fields have been mapped, drilled, cored, produced for over a century. So we know where the forest lays. We know where these reservoirs are. So in our particular case, we started this project as just a pure play oil project in 2017 with 8 idle wells that were basically left by the prior operator. They sat idle for close to a decade. No one really was developing this area, and we came on, picked up the leases, And we said, okay, what are we going to do with these wells? Well, we abandoned 4. So right away we took that liability off the books. We plugged and abandoned 4. We returned 4 to production. Now, will we ultimately convert those wells to GeoTest? In our case, most likely not. We will convert them to temperature and pressure observation wells, so we can monitor the performance of our reservoir as we heat it. So we will integrate and use every well bore, but unless it has the structural and mechanical integrity to sustain the flow rates, the elevated temperatures, and the pressures we're dealing with, it won't be used as, producers for our GeoTest. So it's kind of it's a distinction we like to make, because I think there's a lot of people broadly in the geothermal world that are saying, well, look, we can just take these old well bores and convert them to geothermal producers or whatever, to a new technology. And I think it's important to note that, for example, the next well we abandon has a fish in the hole. So you've got some issues where you're not going to just turn that into a GeoTest well,
Right.
but we will plug it back, and we will convert it to an observation well.
Got it.
To see, how our battery is performing. So a long way of saying, if it's got structural integrity and mechanical integrity, you can do it. But even if it doesn't, we're finding a purpose for it in, monitoring our new wells and our new facilities that we're installing.
Okay, so I'm going to take one more step back. You're saying GeoTest, which presumably is geologic thermal energy storage, which is different from your conventional geothermal.
Absolutely,
right?
very different.
So
yes.
In layman's terms, the 3 or the 5, whatever it may be, what are the key distinctions between your conventional geothermal, and maybe just for the audience?
Sure.
Because believe it or not, man, we are getting a lot of people who actually listen to this stuff.
Absolutely, I believe it. Who wouldn't listen to PetroNoia?
Yeah, of course. It's great marketing. So defined in layman's terms, conventional geothermal, and then how is it different from the thermal energy storage? Because when I hear energy storage, at least initially, I was like, oh, like battery, and
right.
that isn't right either. So
right.
Let's just
yeah. So traditional geothermal, hydrothermal geothermal, 70% of U.S. geothermal production is produced in California, which is awesome. So we've got a lot of traditional geothermal, whether it's down southeast of San Diego in El Centro area, where I'm, from San Diego, so kind of near me, all the way up north to Sonoma County and the geysers in Northern California. And the way it was identified is no different than how oil and gas was identified in California, through surface expressions, or in this case, you have hot springs. And so the hydrothermal geothermal networks are effectively where you're finding very hot water communicating with surface. And then geothermal developers came along and said, well, let's tap into those heated, networks, and let's harness the heat and flash steam in the wellbore. You have an organic Rankine cycle, and you're going to make power. That's kind of the traditional hydrothermal geothermal asset. Then you've got enhanced geothermal systems, which with Fervo, they're tapping into hot, hard rock, and it's typically dry. So they're introducing water to a hot, hard rock structure, and then they're doing the same thing, flashing steam in the wellbore, organic Rankine cycle, make power. GeoTest, which is geologic thermal energy storage, is neither of those. It's we're tapping into oil reservoirs that, in their natural state, our temperatures are about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So not that hot, not hot enough to make power.
Okay.
But what we're doing is we're taking our empirical knowledge base of enhancing oil recovery in California by use of steam turbines making steam to put downhole to improve or enhance your oil recovery, which elevates the temperature of the entire reservoir. And so over 70 years, we've been producing oil this way with enhanced
Right.
oil recovery. And that's where my project partners, our engineers, come from, that background of optimizing your steam injection to enhance your oil recovery. And it's not uncommon to see oil reservoirs in Kern County operating at elevated temperatures between 400 and 600 degrees Fahrenheit. So our engineers said, well, look at this. We know that these reservoirs can store and maintain this heat, but California and Sacramento does not want the increased carbon intensity of using natural gas as a feedstock to heat these reservoirs.
Sacramento being the
political angle of this. Yeah. And so Governor Newsom comes in and he says, well, we're going to shut down oil projects across the state, which he effectively shut down permitting. And we said, myself and our engineers said, well, we need to have a project. So what can we do?
Right.
How can we heat the reservoir without using natural gas, number one? And number two, how can we convert this to a process that is aligned with the long-term goals of Sacramento? And by the way, it's addressing a major problem with our grid infrastructure on the California Independent System Operator. So kind of a lot in here in this explanation of why we're different. But what we're doing is we're using concentrated solar thermal in the form of parabolic troughs rather than natural gas to heat a porous, permeable sandstone reservoir. So, call it, just some numbers, call it 30+% porosity, which is pretty porous. It looks like beach sand in terms of our porosity. And then you're looking at upwards of, 700 millidarcies on permeability. So these are porous, permeable sandstone reservoirs that we can heat up, that can store thermal energy for tremendous periods of time. And so that's the main difference. It's really nothing like a traditional geothermal or an enhanced geothermal system. It's really a first of a kind geologic thermal energy storage system that, as an added benefit, we will co-produce the oil out of that reservoir.
So just once again, to take another step back, there was policy instituted that, for lack of a better word, was just completely dumb and asinine. And a group of dudes got together and said, well, instead of whining about this, let's figure out a solution.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out that you could utilize concentrated solar as a meaningful substitute for natural gas.
Right.
And here you are.
Here we are. And the solar does nothing more than heat brackish produced water. So, we're selling the oil as the first phase of the project. So you're producing the commingled oil and water. There's very little gas in our field. We're selling the oil, and now you're left with a brackish, 16,000 total dissolved solids. So, it's brackish water, and we're heating that with the solar array to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're re-injecting it into the reservoir. So it's a hot water flood, effectively. Yeah. And that's why we also call it synthetic geothermal, because we're taking 100-degree natural, temperature and elevating it to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit in the subsurface with sunlight.
So how do you think the market, when this scales, because it will, because it's awesome, is it a long duration battery? Is it a brownfield redevelopment? Is it all of the above? Or I know we want to do this thing where we have to bucket or silo these classifications, but this is also going on in the nuclear world, where nuclear has 6 or 7 different meanings. It seems like this category of geothermal is branching out into all these little subcategories with their own little unique nuances.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. On brownfield conversion, let's say when we demonstrate this, I like to say we want to be the George Mitchell of Kern County. We want to unlock a new technology that everybody in the basin says, wow, we need to be doing this. So if you went to a field like a Bell Ridge, which is referenced in the paper, it's already at an elevated temperature because they've been injecting steam for some time in that field. So in that case, your oven is quote unquote preheated. And you would presumably have a number of wells that do still have mechanical and integrity and structural integrity, because they're elevating, they're still working at these elevated temperatures. They're just using natural gas to heat the reservoir. So could you go to a Bell Ridge, and the paper discusses that, and convert it to a GeoTest? Absolutely. In our case, the second component of your question, can it be a grid storage technology, or is it a daily dispatch technology? It's both. So as you look at the duck curve that has been created on the California Independent System Operator, as well as ERCOT, you have the flood of photovoltaics during the daytime. It destabilizes the power grid, where you're literally curtailing power. But then invariably the sun goes down and you need something that operates at night. And so that's where our model for selling power is to sell that power 5 to 8 hours at peak and night when your intermittent renewables go offline. Now we tap into our stored sunlight in the reservoir. We dispatch hot water to surface to a separate closed loop process that is tied to a heat exchange that has a traditional steam turbine power generation set. So we're dispatching 500 degree Fahrenheit water to that heat exchange, and we're making power. And we're making power only when the grid needs it at peak and night.
So in other words, you're being efficient.
We're not baseload, because baseload power markets you touch on this all the time, but they've been destroyed by the intermittent renewables. There is no incentive to build a baseload power plant anymore. So we're selling it at night when the grid needs it. And then when you have a seasonal event, which happens every season has a different reason why there will be a seasonal event. We can be on for 42 days or 1,000 hours. And that's the power of the reservoir.
That's what I thought was awesome. So one of the things in the paper that I had to read like 2 or 3 times, like, you read something, you're like, no way. And so you would say, number one, it can provide heat for weeks, not hours, but also, and I'd love for you to comment on all of these, maybe one at a time. It doesn't rely on rare minerals. It's less vulnerable to the wildfires, which in California seems to be like every other week.
Right.
And then it doesn't have the same degradation cycle as sort of your conventional electrochemical battery.
Yeah.
Which once again, like, I believe you. It's not like I'm calling BS.
Right.
But like, you read it and you're like,
how is that possible?
It doesn't sound too good to be true. And so like the cynic in me, because you've heard me rant about this all the time on the rare earth minerals. People are like, we need to electrify everything. And it's like, do we have enough copper? And like, what?
Right.
Like, why would you do that? It's like, you want to stab yourself in the eye with your pen. So one, you touched on it, but maybe expand a little bit. We'll go one by one, like weeks instead of hours. Like that's amazing.
Right. Well, and you think about it, and it's hard to visualize, but you look at the subsurface and the size of the reservoir. So why do we do it in an oil reservoir? Because over geologic time, oil's been trapped there. That's your container. So the thermal energy will be stored in your reservoir in that container that's bound by faults and strata and all the geology fun stuff that our geologist friends can talk about. But that's the reason you don't need the critical minerals, because we're effectively heating sand at a depth of 2,000 feet. You're heating a block, which is our reservoir, to 500 degrees Fahrenheit by moving hot water through porous permeable sandstone. So a lot of this has to do with fluid flow through porous media and heat transfer principles and the physics of all of that, which is my reservoir engineer and those guys could get into the weeds on that kind of stuff, which we won't do here. But but in simple terms, we wrote a paper in Stanford Geothermal Workshop in 2026 where we put a line in there that our reservoirs are big enough to accommodate 23 million Tesla Powerwalls. So that's how big, and we're just operating on a 560 acre leased position. But and that's what, when you think about, well, Kern County has these world-class reservoirs. Everybody talks about how amazing and prolific the oil reservoir. It's no different than the Permian, stacked pay, all sorts of zones you can go into and produce oil from. Well, those are all potential batteries in our minds. And so that's what we're drilling into, is we're drilling into the battery. We're not having to mine it, manufacture it, ship it to a site, and install the battery on surface. So that's kind of the high level on how you don't need the critical minerals.
Sense. And so, like, I mean, particularly with the politics in California, we don't have to go down that road, but like, you would think this would be sort of like their golden egg. This would be like the Santa Claus version of energy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It sounds too good to be true. Right. Yeah.
Are they coming around? Or are they still a little bit skeptic, or what's like?
Well, I don't think it's so hard. You know, we've recently received a letter of support from Congressman Valadeo and Congressman Fong, who are both Kern County representatives, that says to CalGEM, our state agency, and the water boards on our injection application, please give them the project approval for this project. It is paramount to save the grid, to stabilize the oil and gas workforce, all those things. So we're working every angle. We have a federal Department of Energy grant for $6 million towards the demonstration. We're definitely in communication with the governor's agencies, California Natural Resources Agency, as well as the Department of Conservation. And I'm, advocating for us with the directors of those agencies. And so they know about us, but what I've learned in the political world is they can't necessarily show favor to a project or to a particular technology. And we just say, hey, we just need the ability to demonstrate this. And as we demonstrate a first of a kind technology, it will open the permit pathways for others. But for all intents and purposes, the permit pathway for this project is an oil and gas pathway. This is class 2 oil and gas injection, as it's deemed by the Cal EPA. We inquired to them, hey, how do you view this injection? Is it class 5 geothermal or is it class 2? They said it's class 2. So,
you think I'm being such a cynic? Do you think it's class 2?
I think it's both. I think if you read the definition of class 2, there's an oil component because we're going to produce oil here. So by virtue of the fact that there's oil in the reservoir, you can make the case it has to be class 2. Class 5, if you read the different definitions of class 5 geothermal, first of a kind technologies, demonstration, geothermal, it fits class 5. So it kind of fits both buckets. And it's where I talk about us being a bipartisan technology, awarded under Biden, approved under Trump.
Mr. Umbro, the political.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, Western San Joaquin Valley. This is another part. I totally believe you. But goes, the development across that area would enable more than 100 gigawatts of capacity. That is quite a bit of gigawatts. In other words, we can scale this. The scale is immense, and the numbers are actually pretty staggering once you figure out what it can potentially do.
Yeah, it's massive. I think we put 1,600 gigawatts in our Stanford paper. I don't know what the lab put in there.
The gross monthly potential is a 9-field table of 6.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Gigawatts. Yeah, and obviously, that's a huge, stupidly huge number. But what we're doing is we're taking the surface area of those reservoirs at surface, which, if you've ever driven on the west side of Kern County, it's massive. I mean, it goes for miles, and there's these 9 large fields, some of which have produced over 1 billion and 2 billion barrels of oil. So the reservoirs are massive. Then we look at the daily solar irradiance over those fields. We look at the size of the reservoirs, and then you kind of get to this potential installed capacity of 1,600 gigawatts, which is huge. But to put it, kind of pair it back to what we're looking at in our field specifically, we will demonstrate at a very small scale, producing just 100 kilowatts for 12 hours, and then we'll show the longevity of the resource. And then we'll scale to about a 17.5 megawatt first commercial expansion, which is enough power that we can interconnect at the nearby substation, but not a huge amount. And then we look at expanding in 50 megawatt expansions. So a 50 megawatt expansion is, several patterns of well bores and surface infrastructure, but we're scaling up to a potential resource of 400 plus megawatts at our site. And so you can get to a pretty big site, and then you factor in there's other oil fields very close by to us where if we picked up those fields, we think we could get to like the 1 gigawatt scale. So you can get to scale out there in these reservoirs. There's a massive potential for it. And it goes back to kind of if, I wasn't really around in the early shale days in the industry. But I was around from 2007 to 2012, where it's like, you saw this explode. Like my first job in investment banking, we had a team in Houston, and I was to cold call producers around the country trying to buy production of conventional oil and gas. In 2007, the world's running out of oil, right? And so that's kind of how we look at GeoTest. Like, okay, it sounds like a huge potential number, 1,600 gigawatts, but the pore space is there. The surface availability is there because these are remote areas where no one's living out here in these oil fields. So yeah, you can get to an absolute, Renaissance type number of the oil fields.
It's like that scene from Beverly Hills Cop 2. Remember?
Which one?
Right, Axel Foley has to go to the oil fields because that's where they have to get the money from like Bridget Nielsen.
Oh yeah, that's where all the action happens.
Beverly Hills Cop 2. So one of the things on the topic of scale, like there's an article that literally came out like 20 minutes ago. Like I don't know why I subscribe to all this crap. But it's basically highlighting a heads up that the tech bros in the not too distant future could be very regretful of putting all their chips on the natural gas bet because there's this prevailing, I guess, misnomer that natural gas prices are never going to go up. And at some point they're definitely going to go up. Yeah. So the article is saying like, look, maybe these guys shouldn't put all their chips in the natural gas bet. But they are because it's obviously super reliable and incredibly cheap.
Right.
In terms of like economics, can this, and I'm sure we'll get there, but what's sort of the trajectory of getting it on par with natural gas cost?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's far off to say you could be cheaper than a natural gas storage facility. California imports 90% of the natural gas we need, and they store it in depleted oil and gas reservoirs. So it's kind of similar. Like this is known stuff here for natural gas storage. But yeah, we look at getting our cost of power. We don't use a lot of the like Lazard levelized cost metrics. It's not purely applicable. But we want to get our cost of power below 6 cents a kilowatt hour for kind of a break even point, and then drive it down lower than that. So I don't know exactly where natural gas power plants are on a cost per kilowatt hour, but folks are saying, well, it's more expensive than solar, and it's already cost prohibitive if you compare it to solar and lithium batteries. But yeah, I think we can get that down to on par with natural gas power generation for sure. What are the numbers you're seeing on natural gas power generation?
In terms of just forecasts, like I just did this presentation and I'm like, all these forecasts are stupid, right? And it's not because the people are doing are stupid. It's just because I think we're living in this world where everything is focused on announced gigawatts, not converted gigawatts. Announced gigawatts is just like this hypothetical aspirational. It's like, to me, it's like when a little kid goes, say, when I grow up, I'm going to be like an NBA player.
Right.
All right, well, like you have to go through like high school and college and you have to be drafted, then you can finally play in the NBA.
Right.
Like I think that analogy holds true with the conversion. It's like, yeah, there's announcements going everywhere, but what people aren't talking about to the extent that they should. And I'm actually releasing this and just so the audience knows Mike's not giving me a gratuitous plug.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about next week where, I think a lot of these forecasts, particularly as it relates to price, are getting out of hand and a little bit misleading because it's not taking into account like three different things. like the first thing is just permit reform. Like that is not going to pass, and that is a
Right.
major constraint on the ability to scale or store or all the above with natural gas. Number two, geopolitical dynamics. Right, I don't envision a scenario over the next 25 years where countries get friendlier with one another because of the constraints on water, rare earth, energy, etc.
Yeah.
And I think the third one is I think the investment community is at some point going to say we've given the tech bros $1 trillion, right? We would like a return on $1 trillion, and what's the realistic expectations for return on that? I think investors tend to hold their capital and institute more like a wait and see mentality before they start saying, well, here's some more money, which all of those things have a direct impact on
Right.
price.
Yeah.
So I think any forecast that I see that doesn't necessarily take that into account, and once again, to be fair, like your crystal ball is as good as mine, as I always like to say.
Yeah.
I would like to see a little bit more pragmatism enter into the mindset. So I'm not skirting your question, but the answer is like, man, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to play out. The other thing too, like bringing it back to, California, there's an irony going on, right? Kern County in particular, but certainly other parts of California. Y'all could be like the national test bed for GeoTest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you see this emerging. Are you guys, without giving anything away or just in the confines of what you're comfortable with, like what's DOE's involvement? Like, what are they saying? Like, how are those conversations evolving?
Yeah. So we when we first came with this, people have asked like, how did you get to work with the labs and the DOE? I literally went to Geothermal Rising, the conference in 2022, and walked up to, at the time it was NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, and just said, hey, you guys have written concept papers on this. We actually have a project. We're going to do it. And that was how it started. Walking up to their booth at Geothermal Rising, just walking up and meeting people. And then by early spring of 23, we were at Golden, Colorado in a workshop on GeoTest and a geothermal workshop. Then we formed a geothermal partnership with the Department of Energy, GTO, Geothermal Technologies Office at the time. Now it's renamed HGEO, Hydrocarbon Geothermal Energy Office, and 3 national lab, NREL, Idaho, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And then fast forward to 2024, we applied for a grant under the Solar Energy Technologies Office. We win the award for $6 million to demonstrate GeoTest. Then Trump comes in. Everybody thinks their project is getting canceled. My own team, we're dead. It's not going to happen. I said, I went to DC 4 or 5 times. I bumped into Secretary Wright when he was nominated in December of 25. He wasn't confirmed yet, or 24.
Wait, you bumped into him? Like where? Like at the bar?
In the lobby of the Waldorf. In the lobby. I'm dead serious. In the lobby.
Just coincidentally.
He walked by, and I'm having a tequila soda with my buddies after a day of meetings. And I'm like, I just jump up. My buddies are like, where are you going? I was like, that's Secretary Wright.
You're like liquid courage, you have your tequila. You're like,
well, I was pretty sober, but he was with his wife. I just said, here's my card. Here's GeoTest. We're waiting this, that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that went anywhere. You don't know, but like I'm the type of person where I'm going to talk and go meet with anybody I can meet with. But fast forward, I ended up going back to DC 3 or 4 times. He ends up getting confirmed. Yeah. I don't think that conversation probably ever went anywhere in his head,
right.
But it's all these points to like lead up to the answer to your question. Like, how does the DOE think about this? I think the DOE absolutely needs a company like ours and someone like me that is going to say, we're going to do this first of a kind thing. We're going to show it's happened. And look at like Tim Latimer and Fervo. They started in 2017. They were awarded some grant money. They started, small, and now they just did an IPO and raised $2.2 billion. I think it's kind of the same type of thing where the DOE is a necessary partner for first of a kind technologies. And I think that's where they understand their role plays is, without the, I don't think validate is the appropriate term, but without the partnership, I don't know that we could have then raised, the money to match budget period 1, which, we raised money for budget period 1. And now to raise our Series A, I don't think we could raise that money without the partnership with the DOE, and without, slowly peeling back the layers of GeoTest and showing it how it works. So I think that's how we see the relationship. And geothermal, partnership with the DOE has been great for us from that perspective of, they want to see certain technical developments happen, and we're showing those. And then a lot of our money it's basically a reimbursement. Some people think, oh, you just get this $6 million check. That's not how it works. You put out the money and then they reimburse you on the cost share. And on our particular project, our cost share is almost 70%. So this is not like just a taxpayer giveaway. Hey, we're going to give PRM all this money to do it. That's not how this works.
That's the thing that drives me crazy. And once again, like when it was Biden, like people are like, oh, well, now it's just these other technologies that are getting a subsidy. I'm like, that's not what's going on. Like wind and solar were giving us a subsidy essentially to survive because they financially could not cut it on their own. Like they had like a slow death, and the subsidy just kept them alive on their deathbed, so to speak. With these particular technologies, it almost is like, once again, it's like venture capital that has milestones and accountability structures in them where, like, if you screw up and you just piss the money away, you are held accountable. Like, it's not just, well, here you go get them, Tiger. Like, I think that's a main difference that people don't necessarily talk about is they're conflating, like, the subsidy world of, like, 5 years ago with sort of like this incubator or venture capital approach where it's this technology works, this technology is functional, this technology can be scaled, but it needs a financial injection to make that possible. Like I get irritated when people conflate that too.
And that's why I was so confident that we would get approved under the new Trump administration, because we're oil, we're geothermal, we're drill baby drill. And like you say, there's milestones here. So at the end of the first year here, which ends in December, we'll have a big phase review and we'll see if we've hit our go, no go milestones, and they'll stop it. If it's a project that's, not performing, they'll stop it. And I think that's what the taxpayers deserve is those checks on what's happening. And I think, we ultimately got approved, 6-7 months into the new Trump administration, in July of 25 to go forward. And we're one of like a handful. And now you're seeing they're putting out new funding opportunities and they're starting to run those processes again with, I think, a lot more controls in place, which the taxpayers should feel good about, because it's no longer just this give wind and solar everything mentality.
Right. It's like, let the best man win.
Yeah.
The other thing too, one of the interesting trends that I see, and I've actually been talking about this as well, is like you have this world where it's like technology, industrials, and energy. And, 10, 15 years ago, they all sort of operated on their own little island, doing their own little things. And they would get together every now and then for like the Olympics, right? But it wasn't like this coordinated effort. And now you have this world that's converged and they're almost their own little unified island.
Right.
But the investor community, at least the institutional investors that I've been talking about, increasingly view it as infrastructure. Right. That combination. So it's not just power and energy with a sprinkle of technology. It's like, this is a broader infrastructure play.
Absolutely.
Do you consider this more infrastructure than power? Or, like, generally speaking, how do you think of like the investment thesis driving the value prop of the technology?
Yeah, I was having the same conversation with my CEO the other day where I said, man, it'd be great to get a power and infrastructure fund as a long-term partner for this, because it's infrastructure, because you're dealing with existing infrastructure of these oil fields that are prime for rebirth or renaissance. I love the Renaissance analogy. Like they need new technologies coming in. Meanwhile, Sacramento's energy policies have basically starved these oil fields of capital investment. So there's an arbitrage opportunity for GeoTest where everybody is beat to shit in Kern County, and they need a new technology to revitalize not only the legacy infrastructure, but investment into the community, bringing jobs back into the community. And then on the power side, is it building your own power behind the meter? It could be. If we demonstrate GeoTest works, there's so much land out there. There are recent data center announcements by California Resources Corporation and other major oil companies out in that Kern County area. Now, they're converting their natural gas peaker plant. We're doing GeoTest, so different application, but you're seeing a push for data center build in this area. So I think it has all those hallmarks. I try to kind of just be a very aware observer of what's happening in the AI build, because we are at this, it feels like a top of the market where it's just a frenzy. Oh. And so I've been careful to not say, oh yeah, GeoTest, AI, boom, pair it together, it's done. But to put kind of circle back to the natural gas, either a gas peaker or a combined cycle gas plant. I pulled up the numbers on Lazard where they've got it at $51 to $130 per megawatt hour on a combined cycle gas plant, or a gas peaker, which is typically most of California's gas plants are now operated as peakers because the photovoltaic has destroyed the baseload, all that stuff. So they're operating at between $145 and $300 a megawatt hour. So, we're under that price today in terms of what our modeled economics are for GeoTest and what the National Labs model is for GeoTest power costs. So it is infrastructure, pure play power infrastructure. We're cost competitive today on the models. Now we need to demonstrate that we can do it and demonstrate that we can scale it in those cost frameworks. But yeah, I think it's absolutely both.
Yeah, I think on that point too, I'm a little bit relieved, of course, as your friend, but also just as just someone who's so not cynical. That's not the right word. I think there's this over euphoric feeling in the market as it relates to AI. I'm a big AI guy. Lord knows I use them, as I always say, for really cool memes.
Right.
I increasingly use AI. I don't rely on it because there is a real thing with AI slop. But I was having this conversation with somebody else. The price to cash flow multiple for the Magnificent Seven is 34 times. The 5-year median for the S&P 500 is 15. Oh, wow. So the Magnificent Seven is essentially trading at a 250% premium to the market, which is fine, but the probability of it reverting slightly to the mean is so much greater than it going to 40 times.
Right.
And so what is that inherent ripple effect when that 34 times price to cash flow multiple goes to 25 times? You're still trading at a 150% premium to the market, but all markets revert over the course of time. And there is going to be this ripple effect, like I said. So you have the Magnificent Seven trading at 34 times price to cash flow. Energy utilities are trading at 10.5 times cash flow, and industrials are 20. But why I think that's so relevant is the S&P 500. Within the S&P 500, the Magnificent Seven makes up 34% of the index from a market cap perspective, right? So 7 companies make up over a third of the market cap,
right?
And then they account for about 35 basis points of impact. So if the Magnificent Seven moves 1%, the market moves at 34 basis points, which is insane. 4 years ago, that was 22 basis points.
Right.
So my point being is I think everyone is hitching their wagon to the AI hype, which is fine, but at some point it will plateau and revert. And then if you're like, oh, I'm on the AI wagon, well, the AI wagon is correcting, and no one wants to go to the party when the party is the punch or the whiskey's being taken away from the punch bowl. Like, I don't think people are necessarily understanding that. It's driving me a little bit wonky.
Yeah, and we saw what happened to Leopold's fund when just a little bit of a correction blew that guy's fund up.
That's just that. But yeah, these things, and this was part of the thing I was talking about with some manager teams and some boards. I'm like, everyone thinks that they can sort of, not everyone, but a significant percentage of manager teams think that they can beat historical precedent. And my thing to them is like, historical precedent is precedent for a reason. Right? Because you can't beat it. It is what it is. So
yeah,
I like the idea of sort of diversifying away from the AI hype. Now, once again, my kids are going to college. Their college fund is almost entirely funded by like NVIDIA and Microsoft.
That's good.
Yeah, so I don't want to be like a hypocrite on it.
Yeah.
But I think the more critical thing is like you have the US, China, Russia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Europe, all with different capabilities, all with a different strategic focus, all with a certain mindset. And the likelihood of those companies coming together and agreeing on any sort of like global energy policy is just not going to be in place. So why wouldn't the US sort of diversify across all these technologies that work, right?
Yeah.
Not just diversification for the sake of diversity, but why this stuff that just everything to make sure that it works.
Yeah, and we should be. No, that's what has presented the problem that we're trying to solve on the CAISO market is just a concentration on one technology, being solar paired with lithium batteries. And now we're seeing, in the springtime, you've got massive curtailments, and that costs all the ratepayers because we're either paying Arizona and Nevada to take it, or we're shutting down, natural gas power plants from running at their optimal rates to just being peaker plants. And all these costs get absorbed by these ratepayers. And then in the summertime, we might not have enough available power, and you have these blackout scares because the solar isn't enough, and now you've got peakers that are offline and you need more power. And then in the wintertime, when you've got shorter days and seasonal clouds come in and you've got storms, now you have no solar, and now you need you need a diverse mix of resource rather than we need everything to be 100% zero emissions. And that's SB 100 in California mandates that we have 100% emissions free power grid by 2040. So we're looking at that saying, well, you've created the problem. We've got a solution. It can fit your 5 to 8 hour need. It can fit your multi-day need. It can fit your multi-week need. But then on the broader context throughout the country, I think it's the same. If everybody's just rushing to natural gas, now you've got the backlog on natural gas turbines that are whatever they're out, 3 years out, 4 years out. And we're saying,
I was talking to a group yesterday and they're like, dude, we'll do backflips. This guy's like 65, by the way.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll do backflips if I can get it in 4.5 years.
Yeah. And we're saying, okay, well, we use a steam turbine, so we don't use a natural gas turbine. So, all of these little things kind of lead to the bottom line of you need diverse mix. You need redundancy in the market. You don't need a concentration of one technology. And you see this now with the AI, data center developers that are saying, well, we'll just do everything solar and just build these massive lithium parks. And it's like, good luck. I mean, one fire, you're going to be out, you're done. Right. And that's happened time after time in California. But, we'll see what happens. I think, we're excited about the potential in Kern County, but there's no reason why you can't do GeoTests in South Texas, West Texas, in these legacy oil fields that aren't even the shale plays, the old vertical shallow stuff. Why not?
I mean, yes, to that point, and I know we're running up on time, but I would love to hear this 2 years from now, 3 years from now, let's just call it the next 24 to 36 months. Mm-hmm. Will you guys be in a position, or how easy is it to move from, let's say, just like a 100 kilowatt demo into the 100 megawatt, Uber campus?
Yeah, we're permitting ahead on that. So we're doing all our biology surveys, flora, fauna, all cultural, everything over, over more than 200 acres of our lease. So our demonstration sits on like a 1 acre drilling pad and 3 acres of solar and facilities. So call it less than 5 acres. So a postage stamp. And then we're permitting ahead for that first commercial expansion, which we're sizing to fit into the local substation. So we're taking kind of a very modest approach to growth, whereas, you could make the case for the opposite approach where the hyperscalers want the gigawatt scale tomorrow. And, could we go out and do that? Yeah, we could go out and buy neighboring fields and put that position together. But I don't think we're there yet. And we're trying to be patient and realistic with it. And, we want to promote the benefits of what we're doing, but we don't want to be promoters. So I think we can scale to, dozens and over 100 megawatts, in that 2030 time frame, but it's going to take us time to demonstrate this works. And so we're just trying to find patient capital, which we have over our company's history, that is aligned with us to just stay in business, grow a project that makes sense, that makes money, and at the end of the day makes oil and power. And so the pathway for us looks nice because there is a lot of fervor, not fervo, but a lot of craze around geothermal right now. Right. And I think it's all going to be like any technology scene where not every technology is going to work. Not every technology is going to scale. And so we're trying to make sure we stay profitable in that growth. And so we'll look at that first, call it 17.5 megawatt expansion with north of 1,200 barrels a day of oil co-produced with this. So that's a nice de-risk to the cash or, benefit to the revenue early in the project that no other geothermal project will have because they're not producing oil. So we have some unique elements that I think speak to probably more of a conventional oil and gas investor that's technology minded that wants to get into the geothermal space. That's kind of our ideal target partner, is finding someone that says, yeah, I want to make oil. Oh yeah, we'll fix the California grid. But we're also aware of the fact that there's a lot of money that says, wait, we don't want to go to California because of these regulatory risks. And that's where our big push is getting full field entitlements. Once we show we have the permits to do this, then that opens up our investor universe to those oil and gas investors outside of the state that can get comfortable with California again.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel on the full field permit?
Oh yeah, our UIC is for the full project. So our UIC is not for just the demonstration. So that's where we're excited, where we'll try to tranche our Series A around those milestones of, okay, we need to show it works. We need to have, full entitlement. And then you can scale, if someone said, hey, we'll scale you to 400 megawatts rather than go in these 50 megawatt phases. Yeah, you could do that in short order with big money behind you. Mm-hmm. And potentially, we're in very, very early conversations. Could we get a federal loan guarantee from the Department of Energy? The loan programs office is that's what that's there for. So, we don't want to have an Ivanpah like the concentrated power tower out in Vegas that was a $2 billion bust. So I don't think you necessarily want to install a $2 billion project before it's going to work and be economic. But those were the Obama days, and that was the Biden. That was that mentality of just throw money at it, and enough money will make the project work. Right. And that's not how projects work.
And spend your way.
So that's kind of a long way to answer your question, but it can scale very, very quickly at our site, per the ability to drill wells, which, these are 2,000 foot wells. So these are not like 20-day jobs. These are like 2-day jobs. These are very, shallow wells. We're not doing any, horizontal drilling. 2-mile laterals, that's not what we're doing. So these are very cheap and easy wells to drill. Now, some of the producers will have expensive lifting systems. and we'll be testing multiple lifting systems. And then you'll have the expense of the concentrated solar thermal, which, there's an expense to that. But again, we'll be making a lot of oil as we expand as well. So you've got cash flow early in the project while you're heating your oven or your reservoir to make the geothermal power. So there's a lot that we have that will go in our favor. But the most critical path for us is demonstrating that it works first. So that'll happen in the next 2 to 3 years, as quickly as we can make it happen.
Well, dude, I'm rooting for you. You know that. I think it's amazing. I love the idea. And sort of back to my point earlier, there was a very specific problem, and you had a group of entrepreneurs just say, look, it's not a big deal. We could figure this out, as opposed to going to the government and saying, please help us. Like, conversation for another day. Mm-hmm. But that's badass, dude. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thanks again for the time. It's always a pleasure. Yeah. This was awesome. And then hopefully we can have you on when this thing actually does what it's supposed to do, when it scales and we're all using it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love talking about it. I'm happy to do it anytime. And I'll be in Houston. Geothermal Rising is coming up in Houston September 20th, I think. So Texas got Geothermal Rising to come to Texas, even though there's no geothermal power produced in the state of Texas yet. But Texas knows how to do things bigger and better. So I'm excited to come out to Houston for that. And,
that's great, man. Well, thank you again for the time. We'll be talking soon.
Yeah, sounds good.